Good evening, everybody. Mike Naso from Internet Partnership Radio here with the latest on Hurricane Danielle and the rest of the tropics. It is late August, and thus things are getting active in the Atlantic Basin. You can see we do have a few features. Here's Danielle in the Central Atlantic strengthening. You can see at the end a good coiling there, and this is expected to gradually continue on off towards the west-northwest, then northwest, and pool like that. And most likely what's going to happen is a track much like this, eventually straight out to sea, and we won't have to deal with it. We have a system behind Danielle that we're going to watch very carefully, and we'll talk about in just a second, and that is likely to become another tropical storm, or perhaps hurricane even. And we have weakening tropical storm Frank off the coast of Mexico here, still expected though to become a hurricane eventually. And you can see the Atlantic Basin in full swing as we speed through August faster than ever, it seems. Here's the latest on Hurricane Danielle as of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It was at 15.4 north, 41.5 west. Winds were 75 miles per hour, gusting to 90s, moving west-northwest quickly at 17, 987 millibars, and again, it is forecast to become a major hurricane now by Wednesday afternoon, but it is undergoing rapid intensification at this hour, and it is not out of the realm of possibility that it could get stronger than a Category 3 and do so faster. You can see the cone of uncertainty is not that uncertain. It's pretty good. It gets more broad as we go further out, but Bermuda, you are not yet in the cone, but I have a feeling by the time Tuesday or Wednesday comes around, you could well be in part of the cone, so you need to keep a close eye on this strengthening hurricane because it's going to be a dangerous major hurricane once it heads on off towards the northwest and eventually on off towards the north. You can see the track model guidance is in much better agreement now, showing that this system really is tightly clustered with the models and its current movement. The ensembles here, some of them have taken it up and kind of looped it around, others have taken it left turn and then up towards Cape Cod, others kind of just drag it on out. Right now I'd say the best bet is for at least a steady push to where it's not going to impact land, but it could be a little bit slower up here than normal, and we'll wait and see if that does occur with it. You can see the hurricane at this hour looking very, very impressive. You can see there at the end even looking very, very good, bursting. No definitive eyes showing up yet on satellite, but you can see right here, notice this little break in the clouds starting to appear. That does appear to be where the eye of the hurricane will develop, and we're going to wait and see just how strong it gets, but right now Category 3 is in the forecast at least. You can see the IR4 there. Right at the end, look at that little, see that little eye popping out there. It does have an eye wall based on the latest microwave imagery, and so we're going to watch that very closely. Another viewpoint of the hurricane there, bursting beautifully, looks very impressive. It reminds me a lot of Hurricane Francis and Hurricane Isabel when they were strengthening out here. Of course, they were a little bit closer and ended up striking land. This one will probably move out, but it does have more of a circular pattern than Bill last year, which of course was a Category 4, and it looks like this will, if not become a Category 4, at least a powerful Category 3 hurricane as it continues there towards the west-northwest over the next few days. Now the other models, the European model here, you can see what it does. It takes our hurricane to the north and pulls it out, but look what comes off Africa. The wave that just left, Invest 96L, it pulls it straight west. Look at that, straight west, and in a situation like that, we may well be dealing with a prolonged western movement with the ridge strengthening in intensity. Thus, we'd have to deal with landfall possibilities in areas of the Bahamas and Florida down the road. Right now, though, it's still a long way out, but anything that skips along straight west like that has bad news written on it. All the big hurricanes have done that at one point or another. I remember Luis in '95. Even though it moved out to sea, it did hit the islands as a Category 4 hurricane, and it did one of those straight west things at a high latitude like that. That is rare, but it does occur. You can see the GFS is a little bit more interesting here. This is the long-range GFS. It shows a bunch of systems developing. You can see there goes Hurricane Danielle, there goes Hurricane Earl, and look what comes by the time about a week and a half goes by, a hurricane in the Western Caribbean. If we went through Danielle, Earl, this would be Fiona, and you can see in the longer range it does take it up as a strong hurricane right on up towards the Gulf of Mexico, and given this pattern, if I were in northern Mexico all the way over to the Florida Panhandle, I'd be watching this closely. Again, it's still in the longer ranges, so we do have time, but nevertheless, it is the wave that is coming off Africa in a few days is what this is on the GFS, so we're going to have to watch that. You can see shear-wise, Danielle and our Invest 96L, which I'll show you in a minute, they don't have any shear to worry about. Danielle's in a favorable environment with an anticyclone aloft. Shear only gets lower ahead of it, so it should have no problem becoming an extremely dangerous hurricane over the North Atlantic. Now, you can see the last several days we had this wave move off Africa here, and it looked interesting, and then it got a little bit better organized today, and it is now Invest 96L, and the models do take it close to hurricane strength. You can see a lot of them are taking it on off towards, say, the west-northwest, but eventually what ends up happening is they push it back west, and some of them end up bringing it a little bit more northwest, maybe still turning it, maybe dragging it, and maybe turning it like that. But the current motion is straight to the west down here. And so if you take these models and keep them with the same types of tracks, but put them where the system's currently moving, you are talking about a track like that, which would be serious. So even though it's a far way out, we got to keep an eye on it, because look at this. Look at that loop. You can see the genesis of Hurricane Danielle, and look at this wave here. This is Invest 96L, very likely another Cape Verde hurricane, if we had to say so at this point in time. I'd say that is looking more and more likely as time goes by. Now, we do have Frank in the eastern Pacific still, not a hurricane yet. In fact, it's weakened down to 50 miles an hour. It's at 14.9 north, 99.3 west. We do have tropical storm warnings and watches for the south coast of Mexico because it is so close, but the wind field is very, very tiny, so they may not even get tropical storm winds. Definitely some high swells, though. West-northwest at 9, it is expected to continue that slow westward motion, and I guarantee you by this time next week we'll still be dealing with Frank, or the remnant of Frank, somewhere out here. You can see it is expected to be a hurricane by the time Wednesday night, Thursday rolls around, and we'll have to deal with it then. And even looking at Frank on the latest satellite loop, you can definitely see it has exposed center, but it's blowing up convection over it, so Frank's staying alive, and we're going to have to keep an eye on it the next few days. So that'll do it on Danielle, 96L, and Frank. We'll see how strong Danielle gets. Right now it is a hurricane, the second of the season. Behind it is an Invest that is likely to become a tropical storm, if not another Cape Verde hurricane, and this one could be much more of a threat to land masses further west. Even after that, more storms rolling off Africa into the Caribbean and Gulf, very possible. Frank, watch for high swells along the south coast of Mexico, and we do have those tropical storm warnings out. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. I'll see you next time.